Today I'm going to talk about how I made the piece Becoming, which by the time this video comes out I will have recently released a music video for, quite a lengthy music video because it's quite a lengthy piece. But as you would know if you've seen any of the material I've been talking about surrounding the piece Becoming, you'd probably have seen in some of the material that it says that the piece was created entirely by hand, or from scratch rather, using wavetable synthesis in Reaper and Reason, and that is true. That is completely accurate. So every sound in the piece was made using just a massive folder of sounds that I made in Reaper using the same processes of wavetable synthesis that I've been talking about a lot on this channel in my series in Reaper. So I think if I went over the creation of every single sound of the piece, it would be, several hours long. But I thought today I'd just go through the assembly of the piece in Reason to just kind of give some context to how everything was made. So that's what I'm going to do now. Just briefly, obviously I can't go into quite everything that's in the piece. It is quite a lengthy and complex piece, both in terms of what's going on in terms of the harmonic, melodic content of the piece, and also just in terms of the processes behind the creation of all of the sounds. Obviously, because we're starting from just very basic waveforms and then building up to really a very timbrally complex piece. So the piece is divided into 5 movements, each of which is a few minutes long. By far the longest is the last movement, which is just kind of harsh noise. The movements are the first one, which is around here in the project, fairly lengthy, which is mostly kind of very open and reverb heavy saw wave synths. The second movement is around here in the project. It's much more kind of low-key, quiet ambient section. And then the third movement is, as you can see quite clearly here, is the much louder climactic section, which is a lot more percussion-based and uses a lot of, manipulated delay on like a simple percussion ostinato, which is followed by the fourth movement, which is really just one quite simple, almost organ-like synthesizer playing a few kind of simple drony chords and then some improvisations on top of that, which I just got down. And then the fifth movement, the longest one, the harsh noise one. So I think it's best to start at the first movement, really, which, as I said earlier, is mostly a set of saw wave synth sections, which, as you can see, are not actually MIDI files in Reason. They are, or rather, this section is comprised of mostly just WAV files that have been imported directly from Reaper and then manipulated in Reason. So let's just go for the really the first melodic line that you hear in the piece, which is just these two notes going back and forth. And how that's created is by just taking a simple saw wave template that I made in Reaper, that one, if I remember correctly, and really just modulating the amplitude on the WAV file that I've got here so that it comes in and out at kind of a gradual rate, and also for the second note transposing it down 3 semitones. So what you get then is kind of a slightly different timbre from what you have in the original note, which is obviously at original pitch, which creates kind of a different feel, I think, to how it sounds, which I quite like. And kind of later in this section, where the interval that we're stretching the WAV file by gets larger, say here it's going to a full octave, the timbre really changes and you get that kind of almost like it's struggling to keep up feel, that really kind of hollow sound, which I think adds something to it, even though it's kind of just the result of a bad algorithm in terms of how Reason manages its transposition. And then I've also just got a bass component to the saw intro, which is really working around a very similar principle with a different WAV file. This one here. But yeah, it's just transposed, and the amplitude is modulated much the same way. And then in addition to that, I've got just a little section of like harmony, which is working off the same template, just transposed again. And you can hear again there, the timbre is changing. It's really got quite a different sound, even though it's all coming from this very basic, just kind of several saw waves with a little bit of chorus and a little bit of reverb template that I made. And as you can hear when I turn the solo off, there is quite a bit of reverb, quite a lot of long tail reverb on basically everything in this section, which adds to the kind of, I guess, ambient feel of it. And which also means that the tempo is more or less irrelevant. You can see here how all of these are just kind of, it's not quantized, it's all just kind of randomly placed selections to give it that rubato feel in this movement, to kind of feel like someone's just playing it on a synthesizer rather loosely, going for what feels nice rather than what conforms to any strict tempo. And for that reason, it's also kind of hard to write out using sheet music, which is why I didn't bother for this piece. For some of my other works, I've been trying to do kind of descriptive scores of what's going on within the digital audio workstation, but for this one I thought it was just pointless, because I'd be just writing rubato on basically everything, and tempo markings would just be insanely difficult to do, and also the chant sections would be basically impossible to describe without just giving a big slab of text, essentially, in terms of what's going on. So I've got, in addition to that main section, which as you can see in the mixer, I've just got a big bus for the lead saw section. In addition to that, I've got a few kind of manipulated sine wave sections, and also just some kind of manipulated noise. So if I go into the manipulated skittering section, as I've called it, it's kind of one of these skittering templates that I made in Reaper with various things done to it in Reaper, but rendering the skitter template and then putting it in Reaper and then modulating the amplitude, the delay, a whole bunch of things to give it that kind of glitchy feel, or like someone's just turned a delay pedal on for a bit too long and it's starting to do some weird stuff or something, which I think kind of adds tension to the bits that I really want to emphasize in the melody that's being played by, or at this point the bass line, I guess, that's being played by the saw synth. So it kind of dips away there, and we have that just kind of emphasizing that this is important, listen here. And then in addition to that, there's kind of just some kind of lilty sine waves, which I made in Reaper, which, in contrast to most of this movement, are pretty much completely atonal. They're just going between two random frequencies that I set up with quite a bit of reverb, and also that kind of contrast against the sine wave synth that I've got down here. So yeah, the sine wave directions, which I made in Reaper, aren't, as I said, are atonal, so they aren't going between any defined notes, but they are going between, quite small intervals with relation to the arpeggios that are being played in the sine synth down here. To kind of give it that spooky feel, which I feel is created by the kind of dissonance in the contrast of, I can't even remember which key it modulates from, but it starts in I think it's F sharp minor or something, and then moves into E minor here, And then, yeah, so we've got the initial key, which I've forgotten, which is pretty much irrelevant since we're just... actually, no, it can't be F sharp since we're starting on an A. So it's probably... it's probably some form of A that we're starting in here, and then moving into E minor, and then moving into just complete atonality with the sine wave sections that are just determined pretty much at random based on what in Reaper I can get to sound nice and dissonant. And then in addition to that, we've just kind of got this kind of sine wavy drone and some kind of a very low sine drone, and also just another track in Reaper with a sine wave that was being constantly bypassed in and out of at random, so that we get these kind of like ticking noises, like someone's plugging or unplugging a lead, which kind of adds to the industrial atmosphere of it. And then, kind of at the end of that, we get this repetition of the sine direction. And then we move into movement 2, which is a different bus in the mixer. And this is actually, a lot simpler in terms of the fact that we only have 3 tracks here. But this is the master file, or the master project file. So you can see I've just got 3 WAV files here for the entire movement, which obviously isn't what I made in Reaper. What I did for this movement instead was just make it in a separate thing here, because this movement doesn't really have a defined tempo, and so I wanted to just do it instead at, at 1 BPM, which is just my stand-in for saying, there's no tempo, just let me do whatever I want, and then taking off the snap function and just rendering this and then putting it into the master project file. So essentially the concept for this movement is that there is a pad section which I just improvised on a little MIDI keyboard that I have, and then in addition to that there is a more kind of staccato synth section which is kind of, I guess, acts as the master for the possible notes that can be played in the I guess the slave synth section. If you wanted to get all Hegelian about this, I don't know. That's just the terminology that I've heard used for this kind of synth composition sometimes. So what I mean by that, and I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to explain this, is that for every note that is being played in the pad section, I gave it a number out of 35, because there's 35 notes in the section, and then what I did was I said, okay, there are going to be 100 note instances in this section here, and I generated for each node instance a number out of 35 and a number out of 100. So the number out of 35 is which of the 35 pad notes is being played. And the number out of 100 is just dividing the length of the note instance in the pad section into 100 equal parts and saying, okay, it's going to fall here. So for example, if we took a very long note like this, just this C here, which would have, I'm not sure which number out of 35. I just did it, going from high notes to low notes and then left to right. So I'm not sure what note that would have out of 35, but looking at the length, that's I would divide that length by. I would say whatever number I got out of 100 is the percentage of that length that is then going to form the place where the where the note instance in the slave synth occurs, because as a kind of a stab synth rather than a pad, these notes aren't prolongable. So the only factor that it's really salient is where they first occur. The length is irrelevant. So as you can see, the length here is, I think it's just like like the default shortest length, but it doesn't matter anyway because the length is not being affected by the length of the notes in MIDI. It's just being affected by the length of the decay in the ADSR of the synth itself. So yeah, I'm not sure how much sense any of that's going to make, but that's how it works. And then here, just very basically, it's just a bass synth, which is just supporting the the root notes of all the chords that are being played in that nice little improvised pad section. And then at the end, we've just got a little bit of delay, just to kind of make everything nice and smooth, to transition into movement 3, which is quite a change of pace, I think. Because the first two sections, the first movement is obviously a fair bit more tense, but the first two sections are both quite ambient. There's not really any percussion unless you want to count the manipulated, skittering glitch percussion in movement 1 as percussion, which I'm not sure if you really would. But yeah, movement 3, which is also made in a different project file and then just rendered as one massive WAV file and then put in the master project file, is kind of quite percussion based and is also a change in both tempo and in time signature, which is why I didn't choose to just have it straight in the master project file, because it messes with the with all the tempo dependent delays if you change time signature and tempo simultaneously just midway through a piece. Which is kind of frustrating, but we have to work around these things. So it's not that much of a hassle, just rendering it as a WAV file and then mixing it, mixing the master project file with that one WAV file just by itself for a movement. Although it does mean that we are kind of working with, I guess, submixes. And given the amount of busing that's happening both in this project and in the master project file, really working with submixes within submixes, which is not ideal, but I think it'll do. Kind of just exposing my poor practices here, but yeah, the mixing, all of the mixing in this is really going through several levels of mixing, which involves several levels of EQ and compression at every stage, which maybe not the best practice, but, it works. So the main feature of this movement is the percussion, as I was saying earlier. So if we just take that bus by itself, we can hear that in a few of the sequences, we're getting basically the same pattern, except for the fact that the main sequencer is doing mostly kick, and the others are doing snare, hi-hat, and they're all given their own special delay. What that really does is just adds a whole bunch of really variable feedback sections, as you're probably starting to hear there in the extra sequence percussion section. So every time one of these parameters in the delay is modulated, it changes the nature of the feedback that it gets on the ostinato phrase in the percussion, which is what results in that kind of, looping, kind of crashing, so many things happening at once, sound of the later sections of this movement. And because everything is tempo dependent, it's not working in terms of milliseconds, it's working in terms of 16th notes and variations on that. It is impossible to get those out of time sections that you might normally get working with like a delay pedal or something, because everything is dependent on tempo. So everything falls precisely within the relevant subdivision for whatever you set the delay to. Even if that subdivision is ridiculous, there are a lot of triplet patterns on duplet patterns, so hemiola stuff, but it does all fall precisely in those subdivisions, so it gets that quite unnatural sounding, really, but that feeling of every time that there's a section of just massive feedback, that it's actually a rhythm that's being played back to rather than just random noise, which is really something that's quite unique to the potentials. To the potential of delay in a computerized context, because obviously if you're using tape loops or a delay pedal or something, that kind of preciseness in terms of your subdivisions isn't possible. So that's one of, I think, the merits of doing things in this kind of hyper-computerized way, where nothing ever leaves the laptop. And then in addition to that, there is really just one main synth, which is just a sampled version of another thing I made in Reaper. The bass saw, actually, the bass saw template from Movement 1, with a lot of distortion, and kind of, drag down a few octaves so it continues for a while, and also with an LFO set to a saw wave, a right-leaning saw wave, so that every time we hit the beginning of a new bar, it goes back up to the max and then dips down again. So as you can see in the MIDI file, it's actually just one continuous note. So all the ADSR is being preserved. So we're just getting this long sustain over everything. Is I guess how I would describe this. So yeah, at the beginning of every bar, because it's in 7/4, it's just this massive hit, which is not actually a new note, it's just the LFO telling it, okay, bring the amplitude for the bass saw before distortion back up to max, and then dip it right back down again. So it sounds like we're getting a new note, even though we're just getting this new hit of saw wave. And then, I guess, aside from that, there's just this little reverse section, just the a basic saw wave pad that's being reversed, and then some just skidders at the end from similar templates to the ones that I was using in Movement 1. And then that's kind of it for this movement. It kind of just peters out into lots of like a little bit of delay and just those kick drums remaining because everything else has been taken out of the ostinato. And then it moves on to Movement 4. Which really is the simplest movement, I would say. Both in terms of what's happening harmonically, because it's more or less a drone section, and in terms of the instruments that we've got. So aside from a little reprise of Movement 1, which is literally just a rendered version of Movement 1 that's been transposed, or hasn't been transposed. Oh no, transposed in Reaper, sorry. Yeah, that has been transposed in Reaper. So just slow down a little bit in Reaper to kind of call back to the beginning of the piece. If we listen to that here. So you can hear obviously that that's just a copy of Movement 1 that's been placed over here. And so the only original section in Movement 4 is really just this very simple, I haven't turned it on, but a sample of the same sort of synth template from basically ever in this piece, but with a low pass filter turned quite low, so that it gives quite a different sound, and also a few more filters on it, which is kind of in the spirit of Movement 2, just playing this little improvised section that I made on a MIDI keyboard. But staying mostly just to this, very basic tonic chord structure. So it kind of has that almost organ-like sound, I think, when it gets into those more layered sections in terms of a chord, and then, sometimes some dissonant melodies on top of it. And no manipulation of the velocity here. It's all just kind of like literally just like written out as if it was just incredibly boring sheet music, in terms of everything being, the same, the same velocity. But I think that's kind of what's necessary when the chord shapes are so simple, and when so much of what this is going to sound like after the reverb, which obviously you're hearing it now with a lot of reverb, what it sounds like is not so much dependent on the individual inversions that are occurring, or the inversions, the chord changes and such that are occurring in the left hand theoretically, because there's so much reverb that it just kind of turns into a drone. It's really working without functional harmony because there is just so much reverb that functional harmony really ceases to work in terms of, you can change a chord and make it a different inversion, but if there's still elements from an earlier section playing over it, you're not going to get that feeling of a different inversion if a bass tone from earlier is still playing, just because there's so much reverb. If that makes sense. Or maybe this is just my way of excusing my tendency to work without much regard for functional harmony, which is what I do a lot of the time. And yeah, speaking of working without functional harmony, movement 5, which is the harsh noise section, which really is based on two notes. Two notes in the bass saw template, which just alternate back and forth. If I go and make it audible. So it's just those two notes that are going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Two versions of the bass saw, one of which is distorted, one of which is not. Obviously, you can see there that they're just being, they're just the amplitude of one is inversely proportional to the amplitude of the other, at least until the end. So it sounds like one is fading in and one is fading out. And then there's another track here of what I've just called live manipulation. So literally just opening Audacity and recording the output of Reason and just having a whole bunch of distortion, manipulatable distortion on one of those bass saws, and just recording what comes out, just playing with the distortion quite a lot, but obviously, in a regulated way so that it has that feeling of a crescendo. But keeping the original two bass saws for the two notes here, because at the end, it really does sound just like noise. So to give, I guess, harmonic context to that noise, the two notes are still there the entire time. Aside from that, in movement 5, we have what I've called the Vangelis synths, which are like just a sine wave that it's fairly self-explanatory. Just a sine wave that fades up in pitch to introduce the movement, and a few of the same saw synth tones from before, but with a lot more reverb. So really just playing at one chord. But again, as I was talking about earlier, with a reverb tail set to, in the plugin it's set to 125, but as you'd know, if you've worked with MIDI before, 125 is the maximum possible value. So essentially set to infinity. So that by the time it's played out this chord, the chord just lasts forever and serves as a basis for the harsh noise sections. So that initially, while it almost sounds like it's going to play a melody, in the end it just turns to this just wall of kind of saw noise. But not noise exactly, because there is a chord here, even if it does sound kind of harsh. And then in addition, there's just a sub-bass, just playing the same notes as the saw bass, just to kind of give grounding to everything. And then there's a lot of manipulated percussion in this section, so what is happening there is just a kit with like parts of movement 3 percussion, just rendered and put into a a kit and then being put through a whole bunch of delay, which is, as you can see, is being rapidly manipulated here, so that it gets that kind of chaotic delay sound that you can hear in the more intense sections of that movement. So those kind of almost like glass shattering sounds, I would describe them, that you can hear in the middle of movement 5 are actually just duplications, or I guess re-renderings of parts of percussion from section 3, which are being fed through a whole bunch of wacky delay to make them sound like that. And to also give, because one of the effects on this delay patch is that it messes with the pitch in a bunch of really random and unpredictable ways, so it gives it that kind of pitch slidey feel. So yeah, even those sounds, as I was saying before, as I've kind of been emphasizing throughout the creation of this whole becoming/unbecoming project, every single sound in the project was created from scratch, whether it be, pretty much all in Reaper, and then just manipulated in Reason. So aside from a few instances like this where I'm just using Reason to give just sine waves, nothing more complex than a sine wave or a saw wave. Everything was made in Reaper and then just manipulated a lot. But in terms of, say, that percussion section, we are talking about a lot of manipulation. So the manipulation in terms of, first creating the sound effects, then manipulating them further in Reason, then sequencing them into a regular ostinato, then rendering sections of that ostinato and putting them into this kit, and then from this kit adding further delay to them in Reason. So really quite extensive manipulation, which is how, obviously, I'm getting weird sounds, really weird, really rich, really timbrally strange sounds, even though I'm working from really mainly just simple sine waves, saw waves, and Gaussian noise. So that's kind of what I've been challenging myself to do with this, with a lot of the music that I've been creating recently, but particularly with the becoming/unbecoming release, is try to create music that sounds complicated from the bare bones. Really just creating entire pieces, creating entire ideas just from waveforms, which has been challenging, but which has been good in the way that it makes me question what I'm able to do, what I'm not able to do, and what I will be able to do in the future once I kind of understand the nature of waveforms a lot more. So I hope this video has kind of been illuminating, if you've managed to watch it to the end. Really, I'm just excited to share a lot of what I've been working on in terms of becoming and unbecoming, because, really, it's been an eye-opening process for me in terms of what I have been able to make from just those bare bones. So hopefully, if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you're interested in digital music, waveform synthesis, even modular synthesis, hopefully this has been kind of illuminating. I know it has been for me. So yeah, thanks for watching this. Thanks for watching the music video for Becoming, which, frankly, if you haven't, I'm not sure how you're here, but go and watch that. It's much more interesting than just watching me talk about my own piece for half an hour. But yeah, thanks for watching this, and see you around.